This entitled mom is trying to raise an entitled army against this poor kid and her special wish. It doesn't take long before the EM says something to completely embarrass herself and have the crowd turn against her. Happy birthday if today's your birthday, and on with the show. Saw the absolute end-all be-all last week. I work for a small production company and we do a ton of charitable work. That day, a few of our crew members, myself included, were lent out for a make-a-wish type thing for a girl whose wish was to have her original song made into a music video. She was battling cancer, so of course, every precaution had been taken, virus-wise. The director reserved a scenic section of the park and got all set up there so we could be outdoors with plenty of distance. Apparently, this was the only section of the park with a picnic area. We weren't aware of this, and occasionally some people would come over, pretty miffed, asking why we reserved the whole picnic area. But before they could get the whole complaint out, they'd realize the situation and leave us be. Embarrassed to even have asked. This young lady was around 14 or 15, and having a great time shooting these scenes for her music video, until cue Karen, a mess of cheap Botox and overpriced athleisure gear, started crossing over our clearly marked barricades with her daughter, around 6 or 7. Our PA, product assistant, rushed over, figuring she was just too dumb to notice all of our signage and physical blockades, and explained in a hushed tone that she was intruding on a private film set. Karen replied, intentionally loudly, that it was a public park and she had every right to use any part of it she pleased. Now, was it a tad bit inconvenient that we'd commandeered a large strip of public land, the only area with seating? Absolutely. But the handful of people who'd wandered over to complain immediately processed the nature of this project and gladly made other plans for themselves. Karen wasn't budging, but we had a permit from the city to be there, so we let her know she could quiet down or shove off. We actually had a right to have her ejected if she was being disruptive to our filming. We really didn't want to though, and we didn't exactly have the manpower to do it without calling authorities. And we didn't want to put a damper on this fun event or make a scene in front of her daughter, so the director paused filming to try and de-escalate things. There was supposed to be a liaison from the Make-A-Wish style program, but the catering guy had gotten lost on the way to the park and she'd gone to go look for him. So, the director showed Karen the permit we had and warned her a final time she'd either needed to watch calmly or get out of there. She pulled her young daughter off to the side and started trying to goad her into singing. The kid was better able to read the room than mum, because she was too embarrassed to start singing, and tried saying she wanted to wait until she got home. But Karen kept pointing her phone camera at the kid and shrieking she wanted her to sing there and then so she could film it. Eventually she started playing some Disney song from her phone and the kid began hissing along, interrupting out our footage, much to Karen's twisted satisfaction. Finally, the director had it and informed her that even though she had technically moved off the land we'd physically reserved, that the noise she and her daughter were generating was disruptive, so he could still have her removed. Not even sure if this is true, but I think he just correctly assumed that. Hello, 911? This woman is harassing a young girl with cancer trying to experience her Make-A-Wish Day. Wouldn't end in Karen's favor. But Karen's pride wouldn't allow her to simply walk away from the situation. So once her daughter had ceased this loud off-key singing, she continued lingering, even as her child begged her to go play by a pond, almost a quarter of a mile over. Karen continually tried to force her daughter into the shot, with hopes it would make us move, cruelly getting her kids' hopes up and dashing them repeatedly. So I guess the kid wasn't especially bright either. She'd keep saying, "Look baby, they're making a movie. Quick, go be in the movie so you can get famous. Hurry!" And the girl would run onto our set, or try to, and a PA or the key grip would return her to her mum before she could run across our shot. But her daughter's anguished cries of disappointment at not becoming famous each time we returned her to her mum were enough to render most of the footage, if not useless, at least a lot less fun than it was intended to be. I guess Karen didn't think we heard her goading her child into disrupting us with fake promises of superstardom, because when the director came over for her final warning, she tried to play dumb, saying, "Oh, I think she's just dead set on using the picnic space, since this is the only picnic space in the entire park. It would probably just be easier for you to move, huh? Said with a combination of faux sweetness and imagined authority. Clearly she had no idea what it takes to set up for a film if she thought we could just move locations on a whim. The director turned out to be bluffing on calling the cops because he didn't want to create a scene until the liaison returned. So he just had a couple big crew guys keep her and her daughter at bay. Eventually the liaison did come back, but honestly, she wasn't particularly helpful. Karen deduced that she was the one in charge and who everyone was waiting for in order to take action, so magically shaped up the minute she appeared and stood quietly to the side. So when every crew member descended on the liaison at once, she just meekly said, "Well, it's fine if she watches, right? People are probably just curious what's going on." Thankfully, the girl in the video had been having her makeup done for most of this while we filmed a backup dancer scene, so didn't notice most of the debacle and didn't care one way or the other. Because Karen had a little kid with her, the girl didn't say she couldn't watch, even though she was visibly uncomfortable at the strange audience. She kept waving to and winking at the little girl though, who thought she was some kind of celebrity. It was actually pretty cute and a perfect compliment to her music video Make-A-Wish. Karen hated that and kept muttering to passers-by, trying to surmount insurrection. But unbeknownst to her, just about everyone in the general area was affiliated with our shoot. She did manage to find one or two people who were irritated about the picnic area being closed, thinking we were just some greedy private party who'd sectioned it off from other guests. But then they realized it was some kind of film production and started milling around out of idle curiosity. Again, we were mostly filming backup dancers at this point, a couple of girls' friends. So I give credit to Karen that if she wasn't paying a lot of close attention to the filming itself, it may not have been immediately obvious what exactly we were doing at that point. That still doesn't make what she did next okay. She'd make the occasional comment to the other picnic people and was winning some of them over. She'd say something like, "But do they need the entire space?" and get an affirmative nod. Whatever. I don't think the other people were really listening that closely. They were watching too intently, waiting for someone famous to pop out in the music video. Our tech people had determined that it wasn't interfering with the audio, so we had begun to ignore her also, as long as she stayed out of the way. Then the star girl comes out of her big emotional dance scene, and she's really giving it her all. So Karen decides to throw in another blow by turning to the woman nearest her and saying again, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look, it's one of those girls who thinks it's cool to pretend to be a boy. I'll bet she hasn't stopped to consider how long it will take her to grow her hair back." You'd think Karen would have stopped for a second to consider that maybe the girl was not cultivating a chic new look and in fact had cancer, or better yet, that maybe a stranger's hairstyle wasn't her business in any case, and maybe her not having eyebrows or arm hair either was a clue, but nope. So our poor starring girl hears this and crumples up into tears, now assuming that the crowds who had been gathering throughout the day were not doing so because they thought she was some famous pop star, but instead to gawk because she was strange looking. She rushed away, and those standing anywhere near Karen hurried off to make clear they weren't associated with her. That's when the liaison realized what we had been trying to warn her about with the Karen's behavior, and tore into her along with several members of the girl's extended family. Like a true coward, Karen didn't even try to apologize. She just bolted as quickly as she could, saying, "You know, maybe we'll find a different spot since you're clearly busy," as though she was doing us a special consideration. Luckily, our lead girl's entire extended family was there and cheered her up very quickly, and some supportive civilians had showed up with genuine curiosity about the film set, then loved watching her dance for no reason than that they loved watching her dance. So she was happy and having fun again very quickly after Karen skulked off, but still really quite a hurtful and inappropriate spectacle. If she gets this worked up over a picnic table, I can only imagine when her daughter starts to face life's real challenges. I would have to think that you're a pretty ignorant person about the world's affairs if you saw a young girl who was bald and thought that that was a fashion statement rather than the fact that she had cancer. Yes, I'm sure there is some 0.0001% of girls that want to rock a bald look, but for most people with even an ounce of perception, the instinct is to go, oh, that's not normal. She probably has a health condition like cancer. That's a really sensitive topic. I'm not gonna yell about it openly and insult her, even if it wasn't something about that. Why would you publicly insult a 14-year-old girl? You're always going to look like the bad guy. The fact that she just ran away is so telling to the kind of person that she is. This happened several years ago, and to date is the most abrasive interaction I've had with other folks in public regarding my service dog, who is now retired. I was maybe about 21 at the time, and was in the beginning stages of really learning to be an adult on my own at the time. I had just moved out of my parents' house to an apartment with a friend. Before this, I still lived at home with my parents, and usually just went to school, work, and didn't often go places alone because I'm kind of a homebody. So between school, work, and the odd outing with my parents or friends, everyone usually around me was really respectful and familiar with my service dog and my general rules about her. I didn't have any issues usually, and if I did, someone less anxious and more assertive was usually there to help me. This was no longer the case after I moved out. I was out and about running some errands on my own, which I was beginning to enjoy doing, with my service dog at my side. Along the way, I realized I hadn't eaten in a while, and decided to stop at the food court of the mall I was in right then for something quick and tasty. I got my food, found a seat, and began to get my SD focused and prepared to go through our usual process so I could get started on my meal. I'm not secretive or anything personally, and usually I'm down to discuss my dog and educate if I have the time or energy with someone who is polite and well-meaning. I have a really intense food allergy, so that's what she is for. She also knows how to bring me a handful of objects on command, like an EpiPen, inhaler, or just lay down next to me to give me access to meds carried on her harness. It's really important that she not be disturbed while I have her check things, because a missed alert can be life or death for me. Not to be dramatic or anything, breathing tends to be important. So I'm about to go through the process of having my dog do a check for me when I see a child making a beeline for my SD. She's harnessed, clearly and boldly marked, and not facing this little girl. That doesn't matter though, because the child is clearly too young or excited to read. Puppy! I placed a hand out instinctively just in time to keep her from touching my dog, who is still set to do her check thankfully. I try to be understanding with kids, but I have a few hard and fast rules. I never reward attempts to touch without asking. I will stop and thank polite children though. Each situation usually gets a conversation from me about how important working dogs are. However, even with polite children, I do not stop my dog mid-task for my own safety. Oh, no honey, please don't touch the puppy. She has a really important job and she's working right now. This is usually a good enough explanation for most children about 2 and up. Not this one though, because she immediately starts crying. I am talking full-on pouring tears and a red face as she screamed loudly in the busy food court. I looked around for a parent and locked eyes with a round, blonde woman who was apparently staring ice daggers at me. Why are you touching my child? Puppy, I want your puppy. EM marches over to me from her table and demands that I just let her child pet my dog. I could feel the heat on my neck. I was so embarrassed at all the staring faces. I'm sorry, I really can't do that. This is my service dog and she's working right now. If I let her get distracted during her task, I can get really sick or even worse. Service dogs are for disabled people. You obviously aren't blind and you don't look sick. Thanks, that means she's doing a good job. What's wrong with you then? Just let her pet the dog. The child is carrying on incoherently during this exchange and has now thrown herself on the floor. My service dog is not engaging her, but is fond of children, so she is looking at her with concern. I get more irritated because I will have to wait longer to eat now. That's none of your business. Nobody is petting the dog. Can you please leave me alone? Your kid shouldn't be running at large dogs she doesn't know anyway. I bet you're faking it. I don't think pit bulls can even be service dogs. Any breed can be a service dog, lady. Please go away and take your daughter with you. EM looks like I just slapped her in the face. She could tell I wasn't going to budge. She picked up the small screaming child, walked back to her table, and put her in a stroller. She gathered her stuff and left. I breathed a sigh of relief and decided to check my phone for a minute so my service dog could forget the ordeal and reset. I figured it was behind me and could go back to what I was was doing. Oh, how wrong I was. Just a few minutes later, I could hear the screech of an EM heading back into battle. The child was still crying, and this time she was accompanied by a security officer.
Yeah, that animal bit my baby.
My eyes probably looked like they were going to fall out of my head. I knew people had weird hang-ups about breeds, but this lady had just been demanding her kid be allowed to pet my dog. I couldn't believe it. This particular security guard looked like he didn't want to be mediating between adults at all. He asked me if it was true, and I of course said it wasn't. I told him that the child had run up to my dog and the mother was mad I wouldn't let my dog be pet. He asked if she was a service dog. I confirmed she was. He asked if she was trained to do a task to mitigate a disability. I confirmed she was.
She's lying. That mud bit my daughter and made her cry. Puppy.
The child is visibly reaching for the dog. The security guard is clearly having none of her crap at this point. My SD is calmly sitting next to us during the whole ordeal watching me. She doesn't exactly look vicious and is actually quite a sissy. At this point a girl, nice girl NG, around my own age chimes in. This lady and her kid were bothering OP. That child was never bitten. You have cameras, right? The security guard confirms that there are indeed cameras and says we will all need to follow him so we can check the footage due to the severity of the accusation. Either I have to call animal control or the police. Harassing a service dog is a felony and a dog biting a child is a pretty big deal. Either way, someone is in trouble. EM looks panicked and starts to backpedal and says she's willing to drop it and everyone can go their own way. Her precious baby is fine after all. Me, I'm not willing to drop it. You lied about me. Let's go. 3 more security guards show up and we all get escorted to the security office. Sure enough, the footage shows that the kid never even got within arm's reach of my dog and EM was harassing us. They ask me if I want to press charges and I say that I do. Police show up within a few minutes and I happen to know one of the officers because he's my ex-boyfriend's dad. We split amicably before we graduated high school. He knows me, he knows my dog, he loves my dog, and has said she's one of the best trained dogs he's ever met. I usually wouldn't be petty, but I excitedly greeted him. He smiles and asks if it's okay to pet SD at the moment. I thank him for asking for permission and say of course. EM looked like she could just throw something. The other officer takes my statement. In the end, the officers see the footage. EM gets arrested and extra charges thrown on for resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. It was pretty wild, and my first real experience with entitled people on my own. The charge for harassing my SD ended up getting dropped, but the other 2 charges stuck. I didn't care too much about that, but hopefully she learnt a lesson. I also did eventually get to eat. I mean, an entitled parent getting arrested and being able to eat food, could you wish for a better ending than that? I don't think so. But seriously people, if you see a service dog, firstly, you should just assume that they're busy. It's not just like a normal pet, okay? And secondly, if they seem like they're just playing in the park or something like that, at least ask for permission before your child tries to pet the dog. Submit your story to be read on the channel at VoiceyHereStories@gmail.com and join our Voicey veteran community at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.